Yeah, good afternoon, dear students. Let us discuss structuralism. Semiotics is related field to structuralism. Semiotics is related field to the structuralism. Okay, that's why structuralism, along with semiotics, is one of the most influential mode of critical and cultural analysis. One of the most influential mode of critical and cultural analysis of the 20th century, right? Structuralism emphasized on the language and formal or structuralism emphasized on the language or formal properties of text, their structures and frames in specific genres like the novel or property. Like the novel or property. So, with this statement, we can understand what is structuralism. Structuralism emphasized on the language, not the background of the author, not the biographical details of the author, not the intention of the author. They emphasized on the language or formal properties of text, their structures and frames in specific genres like the novel or the poetry. Structuralism's emphasis is an extension of the kind of work new criticism practiced. Okay, in this early 20th century, new criticism practiced some kind of criticism. Okay, so what kind of work this new criticism practiced? Okay, for that, this structuralism is an extension. This structuralism is an extension, or the structuralism's emphasis is an extension of the kind of work the new criticism practiced. That's why before moving to structuralism, we have to know a short introduction to new criticism. Okay, so that short introduction to new criticism will help us understand the context in which this structuralism developed. The context in which this structuralism developed, right? Let us brief the new criticism. Actually, the new criticism associated mainly with the works of Clint Brooks, Robert Penn Warren, William Wimsatt, and Monroe Beardsley, R.P. Blackmer, and I.A. Richards. These works, their works set out to develop a science of literary criticism and a literary text, a science. They created a science. Okay, those works set out to develop, or the works of those people set out to develop a science of literary criticism, or they attributed the scientific characteristics to this criticism, or they made the criticism as a science. Okay, by following the scientific methods, or the science-like methods, we can say. They argued that the author's intention behind a work is, far less important and sometimes unknowable than the meaning generated by the language. The meaning generated by the language, style, and formal features of the text. Okay, generally earlier of this new criticism, the scholars, they studied the age in which the writer lived, and the socio-economical and the political conditions in which he was brought up, and how they influenced this writer, and how, based on those all the aspects, this writer produced the literary text. That's what the earlier practice. But here, of course, the writer might have written with a particular intention or the purpose. But for this new critics, that intention is less important. And even for them, it is ignorable, because don't want to consider, they don't want to consider the background. Okay, the background of the author. That may be biographical, socio-economical, and political conditions of that author. Okay, that's why here these new critics, they argue that the author's intention behind a work, the author's intention behind a work is far less important than the meaning generated by the language, style, and formal features of the text. Okay, so based on the language, style, and formal features of the text, we can understand that the meaning may be generated. We can understand that the meaning may be generated by the language and style and formal features of the text. This is what the argument of the new critics. This is what the new critics argued for. They argued that the intention of the writer behind a work is far less important. But for them, the meaning generated by the language, style, and formal features of the text are important for them. They proposed that there is no need to bring in extraneous features. They proposed that there is no need to bring in extraneous features such as other biography or history to understand a text. So what is their intention? For them, it is not necessary, or we need not to read the biography or other biography or the history to understand the text. Without studying the other biography, without studying the history of the author, we can understand the literary text. All we need is to understand that literary text. All we need is the words on the page, and the meaning is contained in that text. Okay, the words, what they need, what is their argument? They argues that simply that the words in the words on the page and the meaning in the text is enough to understand. Okay, the meaning, what is contained in the text is enough. The main point is that whether there is a meaning or not, that's enough. We need not to find any historical background. We need not to study the historical background or the autobiography, other's biography, right? So in other words, we can say new criticism proposed the autonomous existence. New criticism proposed the autonomous existence. And the nature of the literary text is an autotelic text. Autotelic text. It can tell itself. We need not to consider any other extraneous features to understand the text. It can tell itself. It can tell itself. That is autotelic. The nature of the literary text is autotelic. That is their argument, their attribution. Okay, and they propose that the text can exist autonomously. The text can exist autonomously. That's why they propose the autonomous existence for this text, right? So this means the context of the other's class, gender, sexual preference, race, economic conditions were deemed irrelevant to an understanding of the other's writing. Okay, so this means from this idea we can understand the context of the other is irrelevant. So the context of the other's gender, class, sexual preference, and race or economic conditions or social background or were deemed irrelevant. They were considered to be irrelevant to understand the author's writing. To understand the author's writing, right? So new criticism paid close attention to the language of a literary text. New criticism paid close attention to the language of a literary text. The form, the style, paradox, ambiguity, images, metaphors, meter, rhythm, sounds, etc. These are the elements what are considered to analyze the literary text, to analyze any literary text, right? So that's why they paid close attention to the language of literary text. Okay, what is their attention? They focused on the form, style, paradox, ambiguity, images, metaphors, meter, rhythm, sounds, etc. Right? They focused mainly on the tensions, intention and extension. Tensions, not gender tensions. Okay, they focused mainly on the tensions such as intention and extension and contradictions of the literary language. How the literary language created the contradictions. So they turned to poetry. Okay, where can we find such contradictions in the poetry? They turned to poetry to understand the contradictions. They focused mainly on the tensions. What may be intention and what is extension? Okay. So the most influential work in this new criticism, okay, that is William Emerson. William Emerson. He wrote a book called Seven Types of Ambiguity. Seven Types of Ambiguity in 1930. And Clint Brooks' famous work, The Well-Wrought Urn, in 1947, are excellent examples of the work done by the new critics. These are the excellent examples to understand the new criticism. Okay, William Emerson's taxonomy of ambiguity, taxonomy of ambiguity. He classified the ambiguity as 7 types, Emerson's taxonomy of ambiguity moved from simple ambiguity such as double meaning to outright contradictions, entirely outright contradictions. Okay, totally 7 types he proposed. So I.A. Richards' practical criticism in 1929, along with his earlier work, The Principles of Literary Criticism, in 1924. These two were also an attempt to formulate clear-cut approaches to a systematic study of literary text. Clear-cut approaches to the study of literary text. Okay, we can consider these two works as seminal works for new criticism. Seminal works for new criticism. Okay, so Richards, I.A. Richards, Practical Criticism in 1924, and along with his earlier work, The Principles of Literary Criticism in 1924, was an attempt to formulate clear-cut approaches to a systematic study of a literary text, to a systematic study of literary text, right? So Richards paid attention to form. I.A. Richards paid attention to form and language of the text, and excluded all biographical and contextual details as being unnecessary to the text. Okay, even before this Klinbrook and others. Okay, this I.A. Richards, he paid attention to the form and language of the text, excluding all biographical and contextual details as being irrelevant or unnecessary to the text. Okay, his interest lay in the interpretative process. His interest lay in the interpretative process, what he termed as a literary judgment. He termed that interpretative process as a literary judgment. His interest is in that literary judgment or interpretative process. Okay, so no criticism before the new criticism, no criticism before this new criticism paid such close attention to the language of the text or read them so closely. No criticism, no mode of criticism, no type of criticism earlier. Okay, paid such close attention to the language of the text or read them so closely. Right? This is the brief introduction about new criticism. Obviously, this closer attention to this language of the text, to the form of the text, was started with these works. That is I.A. Richards. Okay. So again, let us go back to structuralism. That's why they simply consider that they emphasized on language or formal properties of text. Structuralists emphasized on the language. Already the close attention was paid to language in the works of I.A. Richards. Now these started to study, they started to emphasize on the language or formal properties of the text, their structures and frames in specific genres like the novel or poetry. Okay, so yeah, that's why we can say structuralism's emphasis is an extension of the kind of work new criticism practiced. Right? So let us continue this idea. What is structuralism? Structuralism believes that the world is organized as structures. This structuralism considers even the total world as an organization of the structures, Okay, the total world is organized as structures. Okay, that's why structures are forms. Now, structures are forms made up of units. Structures are forms made up of units. There are particular units. All these units were connected to each other to form a particular structure, that are arranged in a specific order. Okay, that's why in grammar we study structures, because structure is a form made up of units. That is parts of speech. That may be noun, verb, adjective, adverb, like that. Okay, arranged in a specific order. These units follow particular rules in the way they are organized or related to each other, right? These units, those parts of speech, we can say, for example, those parts of speech may follow particular rules in the way they are organized. Surely it is clear. That's why conquered sentences, conqueredness, we discuss. Okay, agreement of subject with the other parts in the sentence, we may study. Okay, that's why every word is in a specific order, because they have a proper agreement. Okay, before verb or before subject, we do not use adverb. But before subject, before noun, we may use adjective. Even for that combination, there is a particular set of set of rules. Okay, that's why these units follow particular rules in the way they are organized or related to each other, how they are related to each other. That's why we have to study structures in grammar, right? Now, not only to the language, this structuralism consider even a poem is a structure constituted by units such as sounds, phrases, pauses, punctuations, and words. Okay, the poem is thus the result of all these units put together. All these units put together, right? So, a poem is a structure, because in that structure, of course, maybe larger structure. In that structure, there are constituent parts. There are individual units such as sounds, phrases, pauses, punctuations, and words. Okay, all these parts. Okay, all these parts basically in written form, the words. Okay, even in the words, there may be images of the sounds or the concepts of the sounds. Even we can find phrases. There may be sometimes pauses, punctuations, and words. These are all, the poetry is the result of all the combinations of these, combination of all these units. The poem is the result of the combination of all these units. The meaning of the text is not confined to or generated by any one of these units. Okay, the meaning of the text is not confined to any one of these units. We can't create, or we can't generate, or we can't understand the meaning based on any one of these units. It is the result of all the units working together. It is the result of all the units working together. These are all the units. If these are all the units working together, then we can find, or we can get the meaning. Okay. So to understand the meaning, we should consider all these. We should not rely on particular one. Okay. This is the structure of the poem. The poem is actually the poem is situated within other forms of the literature. The poem is situated within the other forms of the literature, like the novel or drama. Then, if you want to define what is poetry, if you want to define what is a poem, then you need to you need to compare this poem with other forms of the literature. Only the poetry is existing as the other forms are existing. Okay? There is a dark because there is a light. There is a light because there is a dark. Which is first, we don't know. But each one depends on the other. Okay. The poem is situated within the other forms of the literature, like the novel or drama. Okay. Thus, in order to understand the specific features of a poem, in order to understand the specific features of a poem, we need to relate it to other forms of literature. To understand the specific features of the poem, we need to relate it to other forms of the literature. We have to relate, we have to compare this poem with the poem or the field or this genre of poetry with other forms of the poem, other forms of the literature, right? So the language is structured, the poem is structured, even the literature is also structured. Okay, this structuralism proposes literature is a system or structures, is a system or structure or structural system whose constituent parts include. Then what is the literature? What are the constituent parts of literature? Even the literature is a structure in which there are constituent parts. We can't consider poetry alone as a literature. We can't consider drama as a drama alone as a literature. Okay. So literature is a system or a structure whose constituent parts include the poem, the essay, novel, and drama. These are the constituent parts of the literature. When we consider literature as a system of structures. Now, literature is the largest structure within which we read a poem or a play. Now, literature is the largest structure within which we may read a poem or a play. We may read a poem or a play or a novel. Expanding this notion, we see that literature is also one of the systems within the larger systems of other representative, larger system of representation of culture, larger system of representation of culture. That's why even the culture is a more larger than this literature. Because what is culture? Our dress sense, our traditions, okay, our way of living style, our art, our literature, our sports, everything may be covered under the word culture. Among them, this literature is one. Then this literature can be considered with other forms of culture. Okay, this literature can be considered with the other, can be compared with other forms of the culture, other systems of the culture. Then that culture is the larger system now. Within that culture, this literature is the part. This literature is a constituent part. Okay, so we can see even the culture, the representation of culture, in the representation of culture as a system, this literature is one system. Okay, so finally, what we can understand, even this structuralism consider The structuralism considered even the culture as a system. Okay. The system of culture includes other non-literary forms also. The system of culture includes other non-literary system forms also, such as cinema, okay, reportage, television, political speeches, myths and traditions. Myths and traditions. Culture is a structure where these various forms exist, in relation with each other. We should not forget each constituent part has a particular relation with other constituent parts. We should not forget that. That is the basic proposal of Ferdinand de Saussure. Okay, there is a particular relation between cat and rat. Okay, in that relation, there is one specific point. C in cat, R in rat. That is the difference. As this is C, we call it cat. As that is R, we call it rat. We pronounce it rat. Likewise, in relation with other forms, we can find out the features of that particular culture. Okay, that's why structuralism is interested in the relationship. Structuralism is interested in the relationship between the elements of a structure, that results in meaning. Okay, what is the interest of this structuralism? The interest of structuralism is in the relationship between the elements of the structure, right? That results in meaning. How these elements results in meaning? It believes that meaning is the effect of the coming together of elements. The coming together of elements may produce an effect. That effect is meaning. Okay, it believes that structuralism believes that meaning is the effect of the coming together of elements. Okay, structuralism is the study of structures of text. Structuralism is the study of structures of text. Okay, the text may be non-literary also. Film, novel, drama, poem, politics, and sports, with specific attention to the rules or grammar of the elements. Structuralism is the study of structures of the text with specific attention to the rules or grammar of the elements. Okay, what are the rules or grammar exist in the agreement between any two elements? Okay, Jonathan Culler summarized and says that structuralism is an attempt to describe the language of literature in linguistic terms so as to capture the distinctiveness of the literary structures. Structuralism, according to Jonathan Culler, structuralism is an attempt to describe the language of literature in linguistic terms so as to capture the distinctiveness of the literary structures. And he says, this structuralism is the development of narratology. Structuralism is the development of a narratology that identifies. He says that he considered this structuralism is one of the narratologies, one of the narration style, narrative, we can say. This narratology identifies the constituents of a narrative and their various combinations. Okay, structuralism is the development of a narratology that identifies the constituents of a narrative or their various combinations. Okay, it is an attempt for him, it is an attempt to show how literary meaning depends upon the course produced by prior discourses of a culture. Okay, it is an attempt to show how literary meaning depends upon the course. Okay, see, already I told you, Ferdinand de Saussure, he proposed there is a quote. For that quote, there is a signifier and a signification, right? Or signified, we can say. So it is an attempt to show how literary meaning depends upon the course produced by prior discourses of a culture. Prior discourses of a culture. Okay. This structuralism promotes analysis of reader's role. This structuralism promotes analysis of reader's role in producing meaning. Here, it is not the author who produces the meaning, but the reader produces the meaning. Okay, that's why Jonathan Culler, he says that this structuralism promotes analysis of the reader's role in producing meaning, right? That's why this structuralism has its origin in the works of the early 20th century linguist. This structuralism has its origin in the works of the early 20th century linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. Okay, that is structuralism, dear students. Okay, try to understand these points carefully. Watch again and again. I will provide the recorded video. Okay, though you may not be able to understand this lecture, even by watching the video again and again, you can understand the concept. You can understand the information, right? With these words, okay, I would like to finish the structure. Okay, maybe in the next class I will discuss semiotics, because to study or to understand Roman Jacobson's linguistics and poetics, we should know semiotics as well as Russian formalism. That is also important. Russian formalism, because this Roman Jacobson was one of the proponents of this Russian formalism, right? We shall discuss them in the next class. Okay, thank you, Honorable, for watching. Thank you.